All right, welcome to the study group. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Derek.
Welcome, everyone at home. Today, we're going to be talking about realizing our true potential and all the gifts that we have in doing that, all the resources, and our real spiritual identity in cooperation with God. So it should be a fun time here.
Mm-hmm. So our true potential is more than we ordinarily realize, I think. So that's why we're kind of excited about this podcast today. And this title slide gives a visual suggestion that we're not trapped within our own skin, that we have incoming from the universe, from God, from the spiritual benefactors that have brought us to where we are, and that we can draw upon that. We can draw upon potentials within ourselves and potentials that are given to us that we may not have fully realized yet. So there's kind of a double meaning here. On one hand, we're talking about realizing that we do have potential beyond what we may have thought of before. And then there's also the sense of making that real in our lives. So that's what we're hoping to explore today and leave everybody with a new feeling of what their own potential might be, and be excited about that. So.
Yeah, and hopefully getting into the space where we can start to actualize those potentials.
Exactly, yeah.
So let me get started with this first quote. The final dynamics of the cosmos have to do with the continual transfer of reality from potentiality to actuality. So kind of like what we're just talking about, this transfer. And let me just continue. Always will actuals be opening up new avenues of the realization of hitherto impossible potentials. Every human decision not only actualizes a new reality in human experience, but also opens up a new capacity for human growth. So this interesting pattern that we see in growth is that you can only grow into the capacities that you have. So you're limited by your capacity, essentially. But you increase the capacity as you actualize your potentials.
Right.
So you can, I always equate it to like muscle building, where, strength and size and how you work as you develop, you create the capacity to grow in size as you're building strength too. So it's kind of like you can't do one without the other, so to speak. And so we have these potentials in our spiritual development. And as we make our decisions and actualize certain potentials, then we can realize greater potentials because our capacity has been enhanced.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like learning a skill. Like if I decide I want to, like in my case, become a photographer and do photography. There's a lot of learning involved in that. There's working with the equipment, there's understanding light, there's all these things. And as you practice, or it could be anything, but as you practice and grow in skill, then you can create something that's more realized, more fully expresses, what you have inside yourself that you want to bring out. So this flow of reality from potentiality to actuality is always going on. And the more we realize that, the more exciting it becomes because, like they're saying here, every human decision not only actualizes a new reality, but it also opens up new capacity for growth. So decisions are a huge part of this, like deciding to learn a new skill. And if you can master that, then life becomes more real because you can contribute in a way that you couldn't before. And then that opens up, again, new potentials for what you can do with this new capacity.
Right.
And there's this like an engine that just can become part of your life realization.
Yeah, there's a fuel that can be burned from our decisions of actually our free will decisions to create.
Right.
And that's kind of the fuel that's creating the smoke of the identity of something, you know what I mean? Of this true spiritual smoke or sense of identity. It's that a bit of an alchemy or, a transfer. We look at all this
transformation.
All this transformation is pretty hot nowadays in society, but this is the true spiritual alchemy of things.
Right.
You're transferring the seed of identity from material through your decisions in mind and actualizing these things and then registering the realization of reality in spirit.
And the spirit also gives us the kind of the visions of possibility. It's like, oh, what am I going to do with my life? Well, if you spend some time with God and prayer or however you approach that, you might get some visions of what I could become and what I could do. And then you get excited about that. Okay, what's it going to take to do that? And then you realize, because you got that sense of inspiration from something higher within yourself, that same higher presence is going to help with that process and kind of guide you along the way. And there'll be an unfolding of possibilities in that way.
All right. Well, let me continue on to the next one, because we talk about progress in here. Progress is always meaningful, but it is relatively valueless without growth. The supreme value of human life consists in growth of values, progress in meanings, and the realization of the cosmic interrelatedness of both of these experiences. So this can be somewhat confusing. There's a lot of words in here of this process and these patterns, but the discernment of the individual of seeing what is spirit value that contributes to the conditions for growth. And if one embarks on that journey where it might not be predictable, but that's what makes a new thing, you becoming something new while going through that process, like a rite of passage almost.
Becoming more. You're right. Yeah. In that last slide, they were talking about how decisions can increase our capacity for growth. So this is a bit of a clarification on that. And that growth takes place on these two levels, where we have a greater grasp of meanings, our understanding grows, but then we also have a greater grasp of value, and value is what gives our sense of direction. That comes more from the spirit. So kind of what they're saying here between the lines is that we can grow in mind, and we can also grow in our hearts. We can grow in our desire for something better, to make things better. And that's a value lure, you might almost say, or a value inspiration. So the combining of the two, because we need both, they work together. We need to understand what's going on in order to do anything. But then we make these decisions, and that opens up a new realization of value possibility. I can actually make things better within my sphere of influence.
Yeah, and it seems interesting based on, the relative discernment of what it has value and what is value based on your capacities and understanding of what true spiritual value is. So you might say, I want to make things better, but you end up shortcutting and robbing yourself of certain experiences that you needed in order to be a fully integrated individual. I mean, there's a lot of times where an individual might look for a shortcut to get out of the experiential process of doing the work in order to enhance the meaning and value of things.
Yeah, well, that's where meaning comes in. That's where understanding comes in. What is a true path? What is going to be truly better? Not just, what somebody out there says might be better, but we find something within our heart that tells us what better actually is. And that usually comes from God. That usually comes from the presence of the Spirit. So we can trust that.
Right.
And that's kind of what they're talking about when they say that there's a cosmic interrelatedness. Whenever they use the word cosmic, they're pointing beyond the human level to a higher level of meaning, a higher level of realization, a higher level, a greater possibility that has significance in the universe and, of course, on the planet as well. But it's the relatedness of those two that makes them powerful, I think.
And it seems like one of our guys, Lao-tse, saw that. And here we have a quote from paper 94 where it says, Lao-tse built directly upon the concepts of the Salem traditions when he declared Tao to be the one first cause of all creation. Quote, all reality is ever in balance between the potentials and the actuals of the cosmos, and these are eternally harmonized by the spirit of divinity. And then the next quote, the potential and actual are both encircled in the original, the I am. And this identification makes it forever impossible to place a limit on the developmental progression of the universe. So it's somewhat saying the same things, kind of. It's the Urantia book here in this second quote is filling in some of the blanks of what Lao-tse is seeing here, but he remarkably discerned the meaning of this stuff and seeing that both the potentials and the actuals are eternally harmonized by the spirit of divinity. And then here it says that, potentials and actuals are both encircled in the original, the I am. And that's the identification of divinity for all of us to experience.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The I am, that's our link to God, you might say. It's our hyperlink to God, because we can say, okay, I realize I exist. I'm a person. I'm here, and I can make things happen because I have will. And that capacity originates in the first source. This one first cause of all creation is the I am, the I am of God. And we're like chips off the old block in a sense.
Well, it seems that the I am allows for identity to be dual fold because your association with God, but doesn't make you God. But yet your identity is fully cooperational with God. Like you can't exist without God. So because of the I am, then I am.
Right, exactly.
And as I truly realize the I am, I'm getting closer to knowing God and being like this spirit potentials that I can go towards.
Right. So having conceived that identification with this higher reality that exists within us, that's where they say we can place no limit on the developmental progression of the universe, but that also implies to the individual that we cannot place any limit on our own potential for progression because of that relatedness to this infinite source within ourselves.
And that's why I think it's important, though, also is something we'll get into is that, you know, how the Urantia book talks about you find your true self in your failures. Or supposed failures, whatever you want to look at them as. And that's kind of where, if you don't take those actions, you don't hit your ceiling and your limit, you don't realize where you need to grow further.
Exactly.
You can always just sit back, not step on in the arena and talk a big game about how you're going to win this and do that and build that. But if you don't take that first step, then you won't be humbled to realize how great of a challenge this might actually be. But I'm willing to persevere.
Right. And you discover a lot about yourself. You discover a lot about the resources that have been given in that kind of a challenging process where you can become inspired. And there's an interesting clue in here where they talk about when Lao-tse says they're eternally harmonized by the spirit of divinity. The spirit of divinity is a unifying influence. So what's between the lines here is that as we work to realize our potential, if we stay in touch with the I am or the source of divinity, then that can be a unified process, as opposed to just like going off in a different direction every day and not really feeling that satisfaction and fulfillment that we get from true accomplishment or true realization. So the unification of that process is very important, and that's what the spirit of divinity provides. So that was, like you were saying, a remarkable insight on his part to be able to articulate that so well.
Yeah. All right. Well, you want to go to the next one? Kind of.
Yeah.
Draws on the fact that we do need to complete our decisions.
Right. So, okay. Going on here. Action, like actually doing stuff. Action, completion of decisions, is essential to the evolutionary attainment of consciousness, of progressive kinship with the cosmic actuality of the Supreme Being. We'll come back to that in a second. But to describe that process a little more, on the ground sort of, they say that few mortals ever dare to draw anything like the sum of personality credits established by the combined ministries of nature and grace. So the second piece there is reminding us how much we've been given. And the nature part would just be our human potential, genetic potential, however you want to think about that. But then that's combined with grace, a ministry of grace. And that's the divine potential that also resides within us. So we're not limited by our human nature entirely. We have this ministry and bestowal of grace within us as well that can encourage us to reach beyond what we think our limitations might be. And this part of how that happens is we make decisions, but then we have to complete those decisions. I mean, I can't count the number of times when I've decided I'm going to do something, I get halfway into it, and then, maybe not, I do go off into something else. And, that's natural enough, I guess. But where we really get traction with our, potentials is when we complete decisions, because then that becomes something we can build on with another decision that uses that actualization as a foundation for new possibilities, for new potential. And this whole connection to the Supreme Being, in the Urantia book, they introduce this concept of the finite God of time and space who's emerging into existence through our achievement of God-likeness. So that's a really important role that we can all play in the evolution of reality around us.
Yeah, I think that's important. Oh, hold on, not that slide yet. But I think it's important to just touch on that our contribution to the Supreme creates this threefold concept almost of like what we go in God with and create, what the Supreme experiences, and then whatever else can grow from that relationship, right?
Right.
As opposed to, I think what's really common today is this concept of maintaining the dualistic balance in life. And so the good and the bad keep each other around. Like you can't have good without bad. And so you're constantly keeping those powers balanced. And that's a very materialistic perspective, I think, to think that God is just going to work with just good or bad. And to understand that we're all here to transcend this material identity. And so to become super additive, super more than what is of just dualistic.
Right.
And so that's really what Lao-tse was looking at also, seeing that, no, there's this source, this unlimited source, and it gets broken up. But our whole goal is to follow that source back to the source.
Right.
Follow that path back to the source and then be unified in that as well. So a lot of people like to say we're all one, and we are one in the I am. And because of that, we're also unique creators and children of God also. Right.
Yeah, there's this fascinating blend of uniqueness and sameness that creates a tension that draws out the best in each of us. You know, we are unique. We each have our own contribution to make to this creation of reality. You know, we're called on. We have creative powers. We have will and choice, so we can make things happen. And that's something that we need to remember. And the values are what give direction to that, like truth, beauty, goodness, love. Those kind of values can guide us into what's going to be most useful for the greater good.
Right. What has growth potential. They say that the act is ours, the consequence is God's. So by that, I think about, you know, that's the one part that we can contribute in is this action, the decision, the follow through of it. And then what happens, like we said, is super potential almost. It's like, if the consequences from the relationship of us and God, or us and the Supreme, then that's on a whole divine level that we're not going to really grasp right now, but we're contributing to it. Yeah.
And well, and we can find guidance in that in Jesus too, because he was a realization of the Supreme in a sense. I mean, he manifested in time and space in a physical form on this planet, the highest spiritual reality that could be expressed through human nature. So we can look to him for that.
Yeah. Let's look at this next slide of him to that.
Sure. Okay. So this is really getting down to the kind of the human heart level of what, you know, we all experience. So this is a little episode from the story of Jesus's life after his father had died and he was trying to step into his role and try to figure out how they were going to survive and get by financially. They're having all kinds of problems. And one of the a child in the family had died. So there was a lot of sadness that had fallen over Jesus's family when he was young. They're commenting here that for 4 years, their standard of living had steadily declined. Year by year, they felt the pinch of increasing poverty because Joseph was gone. He was the breadwinner. But Jesus would only say to his anxious and grieving mother, "Mother Mary, sorrow will not help us. We are all doing our best." And mother's smile, perchance, might even inspire us to do better. Day by day, we are strengthened for these tasks by our hope of better days ahead. So there's a lot in there. Just the power of a smile.
Yeah. Well, it's the power of hope too, you know.
And hope.
You know, we talk about faith, hope, and courage, faith, hope, and love, and what that can mean. And in faith, it's almost like, okay, action. And in your actions have hope. Because if you do have faith, you understand that you are contributing through your actions to a greater good, through God-likeness, through the Supreme. And as Jesus, or inviting the Spirit of truth into your life to go in cooperation with spirit realities, to let that be the unifying force in your actions and your decisions and things like that. Yeah. Allowing the guidance of grace.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy to become discouraged during this life. I mean, we all run into situations and times and circumstances where we just feel like, man, how am I going to get through this? You know, the weight of unfortunate outcomes can really drag us down into states of anxiety and fear and all those kind of things. So that's kind of what he's addressing here. He's saying, well, yeah, there's, an understanding that those kind of circumstances are going to be part of our lives. But if we can feel this, almost the smile of God upon us, come on, keep going. You can do it, It'll get better. Don't worry. Just, pick yourself up and keep trying. Those kind of feelings of encouragement from within can be very powerful. But we have to remember that we can have access to that. So that's kind of what Jesus was doing here with his mother in this sorrowing family, saying, look, if you could just give us a little smile, we'll all feel better. And, we'll get through this. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of dovetails into the next slide here as far as
it does
interrelatedness of Mother Mary and Jesus.
Yeah. So let me read this. So there's a couple of points here, but first, great things happened, not only because people had faith in Jesus, but also because Jesus had so much faith in them. He inspired profound self-confidence and robust courage in all who enjoyed his association. When he smiled on a man, that mortal experienced increased capacity for solving his manifold problems.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You want to say?
Well, just that I know from my own personal experiences, when I'm feeling good, it's a lot easier to share that goodness with others. If I have my manifold problems taking over my mind, then it's hard for me to feel a surplus of loving abundance, abundance and love. And I think that, my challenge has always been accepting that abundance is always there for me, even though my chemicals might not feel too great right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a recognition here that we do have manifold problems.
Yeah.
That's part of life on this world. There's no escaping that. But what we can manage or have some control over is how we think about that, how we approach that, what our attitude may be toward our problems, and how we engage with those problems. So this, it's so interesting. We were talking about this last night, how this second quote is so parallel with the comment about Mary. And, we can imagine Jesus says, smile, smiling on us. When you're feeling at your worst, just remember that Jesus is there. He's a companion. And then just imagine him smile. It uplifts the heart, it uplifts the soul.
It does. But I will say also that there's a challenge when an individual is feeling that they've regressed and done something that they feel isn't right. That it's hard then to picture someone loving you through that. Oh yeah, good job doing that. That's terrible. Great. I love you for it. It's not that way.
That's not that way. Yeah, right. Well, it's more about what they're saying here of inspiring profound self-confidence and robust courage. Because those are the qualities you need in order to pick yourself up and keep going. And in spite of those.
Yeah, I like that, because that fatherly love of redirect and recreate or recenter, and so that we can get the capacity to create again.
Right.
That builds soul, not how can we fully accept this thing that you're feeling bad about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, don't worry, that's not even a reality. Like, I think that we can actually build on what is good here. So it's going to take some courage to get out of this hole, probably, or to get into a position where you can feel a little bit unburdened. But once you take those decisions in making the decisions and going in the direction of doing something that's pulling yourself into the direction of light, then that starts to fuel the process as well too. You see progress.
Right. And then once you see that, then you can build on that.
Yeah.
Right. And again here, this is not to minimize the reality of the problems we have to face sometimes.
Yeah.
But what it is saying that we can have a greater self-confidence and a greater courage if we are willing to open ourselves up to more of an associative relationship with God, and knowing that there's a lot of forces in the universe that are pulling for us.
Yeah.
That say, come on, you can do it.
And it might be in corners that you don't expect, because that's how the Spirit is working in new things, unexpected creativity, spontaneous directions, people, groups that you wouldn't have thought, but there's a opportunity there to step into newness.
Right. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. What did Jesus say? Behold, all things are becoming new.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the attitude of divinity, because that's where you can unify with the potential rather than identifying with the problems, right? And that's kind of the key to all this. So hopefully this has been helpful. I mean, the idea that we have potential beyond what we even know or realize is exciting, I think, and gives us something to reach for as we go forward.
All right. Well, thanks, Chuck. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was a good study.
Thank you.
We'll be back for another one on destiny.
Okay.
And thank you guys for joining us. Please feel free to support, subscribe, check out the app, and we look forward to more potentials.
Yeah. Leave comments.
Yeah. All right. Well, God bless.
All righty. Thanks for joining us.